I was a sucker for good two-player scrolling beat-em-ups back in the day. It was a genre I thought defined the early 1990s in the world of video games. So when stumbling across Undercover Cops in Booth's Enterprise in spring 1994, I felt compelled to put in my 50p and have a go. There were immediately two things that caught my eye with this game. The obvious one being the graphics, which had this style that was very similar to In the Hunt. And the other was that this game was produced by Irem, a company that usually made shooters. But it's not like this was completely unfamiliar territory to Irem, as they had produced the legendary Kung Fu Master in the 1980s, and also one of my top 10 favourite beat-em-ups in Ninja Baseball Batman. But when I got to the title screen, I was surprised to see that this game had been released in 1992, and I do not ever recall it being mentioned in the magazines ever, anywhere. And actually, looking back at it, it should have made more sense that this game came out in early 1992, as certain parts of this game are massively influenced by Streets of Rage on the Mega Drive. But I will get to that bit later on. For its time, it was relatively gory, featuring crow-pecked skeletons in the midst of its urban wastelands, and its gratuitous use of Molotov cocktails, grenades, and other big explosions. While the gameplay is inspired by Streets of Rage, some of the enemies are unique. Besides the usual human thugs, players fight strange mole creatures and mutants with jetpacks and blades for hands. Certain enemy characters carry weapons, but unlike other beat-em-ups, these do not get knocked out of their hands, and so the player cannot use an enemy weapon against them. But the stages contain objects that can be picked up and used instead, such as burning oil drums, steel girders, long concrete columns that shatter on impact, boxes of hand grenades, and fish. The characters eat mice, frogs, birds, and snails to restore their health. The game features 3 playable characters, and the game can be played as a 1 or 2 player game. Now, back to when I first played this game. I was curious to have a go, as Irem done a great job with Ninja Baseball Batman. I thought that this would be a pretty decent game, and to start with, it is actually very good. Those early levels have a nice pacing to them, and the action does get quite hectic at times, but the difficulty setting was very high, well, at least on the version I played. 1 credit got you 2 lives, and with a lot of enemy attacks having a far longer reach than the player, it did mean heavy usage of special moves was required to progress, and thus, this game was a coin muncher. In the arcades, I must have spent about 3 or 4 credits just to get past level 2, and then level 3 just seemed to turn the difficulty all the way up. Now, I like a challenge, but this was just crazy. The visuals for the time were quite nice, with some really nice animation on the playable characters and certain backgrounds, which do a really good job of creating this rundown environment that looks like it was inspired from Fist of the North Star. And even this character Zen, with that beard and hair, he could be Kenshiro himself. Some of the enemies are better animated than others. The large sprites tend to have a bit more effort put into them visually when compared to the smaller sprites, but nothing really looks bad or awful. And there are some really neat touches like these TV screens having the end of level boss of R-Type on them. It's kind of like a free plug for another Irem classic. And also this small interlude screen showing the name of the level and announcing the title of the game, just in case you had forgot what you were playing. Although, what is actually being said there? I have no clue. It sounds like Hershey Cops.
Hershey Cops!
Look out everyone! It's chocolate enforcement on the case. The sound effects are very good. First off, you get a really good soundtrack to accompany the action, although each level does not have its own unique music, so you do get to hear a lot of the same tunes. Level 2 has this tune which sounds like a tune from the 1984 movie Ghostbusters at certain bits, but not the Ray Parker Jr. classic tune, oh no. It's more the tune you hear when the Ghostbusters approach the tower block to square off against Gozer. Also in level 2, the music that plays at the lift level sounds like a blatant rip-off from the lift level in Streets of Rage. But as almost every beat 'em up has a level on a lift, I can't accuse Irem of pinching that, but certainly they copied the tunes from Streets of Rage. The gameplay is plenty tough, or it was at the time I played it in the arcades. I went back with a mate to play this in 2-player, but it was skinning us alive with credits. It was just proving too tough a game. And with this being in a generic cabinet, we had no idea on the amount of special moves on offer, which also didn't help. Another thing with the playability is that for an arcade game, this had a fair amount of slowdown, especially when lots of explosions take place. And for an arcade game, this was a surprise. That was something normally associated with home ports. Round about this time, my school days were rapidly coming to an end, and I had found myself with more and more time in my hands, which was usually spent in arcades and not doing anything really constructive. And I did come back to this game time and time again, but I just couldn't get past level 3 out spending a huge amount of money, and so I had to admit defeat and realise I was never going to beat this one. But about 1 year later, I seen it for sale on the Super Famicom at my favourite console importer in Glasgow, and it was already on the second-hand shelves. So for 20 quid, I could not resist it, and so I picked it up. Once I got it home, it didn't take long to discover why this game was on the second-hand shelf. It was actually pretty boring. The home port allowed for 5 lives and a few continues, and this game had this cheeky little easy mode that only allowed you to play to the end of level 3, which was the very first time I got past this level ever, so imagine my disappointment. But undeterred, I played again on normal and got past level 3, and I could not believe how tough levels 4 and 5 were, and also how boring. With practice, I was able to get past level 3 in about 15 to 20 minutes. So each level lasts about 6 minutes, and then levels 4 and 5 are 15 minutes. The game seemed to be artificially increased in length by just adding loads and loads of character gauntlets. And this is something I detest in games. It just made the game so very repetitive and boring. Oh, and of course, years later on MAME, I discovered the exact same thing on the arcades. So actually, looking back on it, I was kind of glad I never beat the game, as the last 2 levels ruined what was, up to that point, a pretty good game. Anyway, back to the SNES version. And the home port was done by Very, and I think they done a fairly good job. Of course, the omission of a 2-player is unforgivable, but that wasn't anything new on the Super NES. The visuals do an okay job of recreating the arcade ones. Obviously, everything is a bit smaller and less defined, and some of the colour usage seems a little too dark, especially on level 3, but overall, they are not that bad. The animation on the main characters is still there, and the end of level bosses are on a similar plane. But they could have maybe had a little tweak to improve them, I reckon. You get this nice little presentation between levels that was different to that of the arcade, and I have no idea what is being said as all of the text is in Japanese. I have heard of a patched version out now that has all English text, which I might have a look at eventually. And you also get this nice little reminder of what game you are playing. And yes, on the SNES, it still makes no sense as to what is actually being said. The soundtrack is pretty much identical to the arcade, and with only some small changes made to the sound effects, the sound was of a very high quality, I thought. And in the options screen, you can listen to your favourite track all day long, if that's your thing. The biggest gripe with Undercover Cops is that it is actually a pretty boring game to play. When you first play, it is actually a good game, but knowing what awaits you in levels 4 and 5 is a real drag. And this is what put me off repeated playthroughs with it. I just can't stand those gauntlet sections in this kind of game. It has always been a trick to artificially extend the length of the game, and also to make it tougher than it really needs to be. When I was playing it back for this video, I quickly started to remember how much this game infuriated the hell out of me, and it was actually a real chore playing it. I played it once through with Zen, but couldn't face finishing the game with the other 2 characters, as it was just too boring and too mentally draining. The game was not a massive success for Irem, but in Japan it was popular enough to get its own manga, which is nice. Overall, I would have to say that Undercover Cops is not a game for everyone. If you are a complete beat 'em up junkie, then you might find some appeal. But for the casual gamer, I would say walk away. On the SNES, there are far better options such as Turtles in Time and Final Fight. And look out for those videos on my channel to hear my memories of those games. And that was my look back at Undercover Cops. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below about your memories of Undercover Cops. And a massive thank you to all of those who have subscribed to my channel and commented on my videos. Your support and feedback goes a long way in helping the channel grow, and I appreciate all of you, so thank you indeed. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.
Hey!